The Alaskan Sunnyside Sisters, take your shoes off. Moses, you're on holy ground. Well, I'd like to address now the last part of Ephesians 5. And, well, not the last part of Ephesians 5, actually. We'll take that another day. But the last part of Ephesians 5, verses 8 and 9. Let's read that real quickly. I'll be reading from the English Standard Version. At one time you were in darkness, but now you are light in the Lord. Walk as children of light, for the fruit of light is found in all that is good and right and true. So we've been looking at that passage during these sessions, and so far we've covered the first two fruits that are consistent with walking as children of light. In another video, we talked about the whole imagery of what it means to, in the biblical language, to be a child of God, a child of light, a son of darkness, or a son of sin. And we notice that to be a child of or a son of someone or something is to partake of those characteristics of that person or thing which are being emphasized. And so to be a child of God in this passage, at least, beginning of chapter 5, is to behave in a godly manner. And to be a child of light here is to behave in a manner characteristic of the light, and that is specifically the light of Christ, who is himself the precise and exact radiance of God the Father. And that's a long way back around again to being godly. And these two ideas, being children of God and children of light, are characteristic of this passage. And to live any other way than as a child of God or than as a child of light would be out of keeping with what is proper to this idea of Christian light and to this idea of the Christian, should we say the Judeo-Christian God. Now, we talked about the first two fruits of light. We talked about the good, and we discussed that as active initiative. Okay, not just a kind of a static goodness, but goodness in action, for example, in giving to the poor, an activity that is associated with ancient Christianity, ought to be associated with modern Christianity, and is certainly an emphasis of some of the early church fathers during the season of Lent, that giving alms to the poor has always been part of what we do. Perhaps you abstain from having your steak and you actively give away the money that you would have spent on that steak to help the poor. Well, we dealt with goodness. Then we dealt with the second of the fruits of verse 9, all that is right. And there we were talking about probity. We were talking about moral uprightness and things of that nature. And so that does involve not only righteous initiative, but abstaining from that which is unrighteous. And now we want to look at this, the last of these three fruits, which is what is true. And this one is perhaps the easiest. We're not talking about truth, what we sometimes call objective truth. Like objective truth would be something like Jesus rose from the grave on the third day, or the virgin birth of Christ is an objective truth. What we're talking about here is what is sometimes called subjective truth, or what we sometimes call being true. So, for example, to be true to your husband or to your wife, true in that sense is a kind of it expresses something like faithfulness. And here it means something like moral integrity. It is living consistently with that which is characteristic of the light that radiates from Christ, who is himself the very radiance, the pure radiance of God the Father. And so Jesus is seen elsewhere as the one, as the faithful and true. And that might not mean two different things, but it could be a kind of a doubling, like when you say you're a big fat liar. Not that you should talk that way, but we're not trying to distinguish between big and fat. We're just trying to make the liar magnified as much as possible. And so Jesus is the one who is faithful and true, and those who are of the light, those who live in a way that is characteristic of the light, they will also be true, reliable. They will, in other words, have spiritual and moral integrity. And so down in Texas, they might have talked about a girl that was true blue. That meant a girl that would walk the line, that would never let you down, that would be utterly dependable in whatever relationship she was a part of, whether she was a church member or a wife or a sister. True blue. And that is what is meant by this word, true. And so I want to return, just as we wrap this up, to the summary that was given by the old Scottish Greek scholar. He said of this verse, verse 9, here then Christian morality is given in its three great forms: the good, the just, the true. And in his quotation, the middle word just is another way to translate the right. The good, the right, and the true. Well, there's Christian morality for you as it's presented by St. Paul the Apostle in his letter to the Ephesians in chapter 5 and verse 9. Hope that's been helpful to you. God bless you, and see you next time on the Ozark Anglican Fellowship channel, or perhaps on the Anglican Church in Bali channel, depending on where you're watching from. God bless.